I stood there, holding a cup of tea, while laughter filled the room. Not the kind that warms your heart, the kind that stings your soul. They laughed at my old clothes, my accent, my simple life. In that silence, I made a promise. They'd remember the man they mocked. Arthur Collins wasn't a man of many words. He'd spent 40 years working on the railways of Manchester, tightening bolts, fixing engines, and coming home to a quiet dinner with his wife, Margaret. After she passed away, the silence of the countryside became too heavy, so when his son, Michael, said, "Dad, move in with us. It'll be easier," Arthur agreed. He sold his small home, the one with the red door and the rose bushes, for $240,000, and put nearly all of it into Michael and Sophie's new 2-story house in the northern suburbs. To Arthur, it wasn't about money. It was about family. The first few weeks were peaceful. Sophie smiled. Michael worked and Arthur helped where he could, fixing the fence, cleaning the garage, feeding their golden retriever, Max. But things changed slowly. Sophie began correcting his words in front of guests. "It's dinner. Arthur, not tea." She'd laugh lightly, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. Arthur tried to stay out of the way, spending most of his time in the garden shed, tinkering with his old model trains, tiny engines that always listened when he spoke. Then came Sophie's social dinner night. The house shimmered with perfume, light, and laughter. Arthur dressed neatly in his best sweater, the one Margaret knitted for him, and sat in a corner, hoping to blend in. Someone asked him, "Mr. Collins, what do you do for fun?" He smiled shyly. "Oh, I collect model trains. Used to fix the real ones, too." Before he could finish, Sophie interrupted with a smirk. "Yes, he plays with toy trains. Keeps him busy while we handle real life." Laughter followed, loud, cruel, and Arthur, sitting in his own home, realized he wasn't part of their family anymore. That night, while everyone slept, he sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, staring at the empty chairs, and in the reflection of his mug, he whispered, "Maybe it's time they learned the cost of comfort." The next morning, Arthur's routine didn't change. He still made his tea at dawn, fed Max, and checked the garden's watering schedule, but his heart was no longer at peace. The warmth of belonging had been replaced with the cold awareness of being tolerated. He overheard Sophie's voice later that day, low, but sharp enough to cut. "He's a sweet old man, Mike, but we can't keep living like this. Your dad's old habits don't fit in here. He's making guests uncomfortable." Michael didn't respond at first, but when he did, his words hit harder than the silence. "Yeah, maybe it's time he moves somewhere quieter." Arthur froze at the top of the staircase, hands trembling slightly. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just nodded to himself, like a man checking a list he already knew by heart. That evening, as Sophie cooked dinner, Arthur sat at the dining table scrolling through emails, something he rarely did. One message, buried deep under banking notices, caught his eye. Confirmation. Joint property registration. Arthur Collins and Michael Collins. Arthur had insisted his name remain on the deed when he sold his house and helped fund theirs. It was Michael's idea to make it official. Arthur smiled faintly. That small request had just become his lifeline. Over the next few days, Arthur quietly called his old solicitor, Mr. Barrett, the same man who handled his retirement paperwork years ago. "Barrett, I might need your help." "To sell my half of the house," Arthur said calmly. Barrett hesitated. "Arthur, are you sure?" "That'll force a complete sale, I'm sure," Arthur replied. "They wanted me gone. I'll give them what they asked for, just differently." He didn't tell Michael or Sophie. Instead, he started packing small things first. Old photographs, Margaret's books, the clock from their wedding day. He stored them neatly in the attic, out of sight. Then came the message that broke the illusion completely. Arthur's phone buzzed, a family group chat titled House Planning. Sophie had written, "Arthur, we think it's best you step away for now. It'll give us space to renovate and adjust. We'll figure out the rest later. Michael responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Arthur stared at the screen, unmoving. No words. Just a long exhale, then, without replying, he walked to his desk, opened his laptop, and forwarded Barrett's last email. Subject: Confirm sale. Proceed immediately. Within a week, Barrett found a buyer, a quiet investor who didn't mind paying a little extra for a fast transaction. When the sale completed, Arthur withdrew his share, a solid $420,000, nearly double what he had once given. He left an envelope on the dining table, taped to a note card that read, "For renovations. You'll need it, Arthur," and with that, he packed his last box, loaded it into a small rented van, and drove away, leaving behind a house that no longer felt like home. But what he didn't know was how quickly karma would turn that silence into thunder. 2 weeks later, Michael's voice cracked through the phone like thunder on a calm day. "Dad, what have you done?" Arthur was sitting by the seaside cafe, reading the morning paper. He didn't look surprised. "I sold the house," he said simply. "Sold? To who? You can't just—" "I could," Arthur interrupted softly. "It was under both our names. You wanted me gone, remember? Well, I made it easier for everyone." On the other end, Sophie's voice erupted in the background. "This is madness. Where are we supposed to go?" Arthur sighed. "You've got 2 weeks. The new owners move in after that." There was silence, the kind that feels heavier than shouting. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice small, almost broken. "Dad, we didn't mean—" "You did," Arthur said gently. "You just didn't think I'd ever stop forgiving." He hung up, took a slow sip of tea, and stared out at the endless waves. For the first time in years, his world felt peaceful. Not because he'd won, but because he'd stopped allowing himself to lose. Before we move to the ending, tell me in the comments, was Arthur right to sell the house? Or should he have given them one last chance? If you've ever seen kindness mistaken for weakness, hit subscribe, because more stories like this are coming soon. Months passed. Arthur settled into a quiet seaside cottage, small but filled with warmth. He grew fond of the neighbors, an old couple who baked too much bread, and a retired sailor who greeted everyone by name. Every morning, Arthur and his dog, Max, walked along the cliffs as the gulls cried above. He no longer checked his phone for messages. Peace had no notifications. Then, one evening, as the orange sky melted into the sea, his phone rang. It was Michael. "Dad," he began, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. Sophie's been trying to reach you too. We lost everything after the sale. We're renting now. I should have defended you. I was just scared." Arthur smiled sadly. "Son, I don't hate you. But respect isn't owed. It's earned. Remember that?" Michael sniffed. "Can we visit sometime?" "Of course," Arthur said softly. "Just call first." After the call, Arthur stood by the window, watching the tide rise. He whispered to himself, "Margaret would have been proud." I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I just remembered who I was. The waves kept rolling, steady, calm, and unbothered. Then he turned off the lights, made himself a cup of tea, and smiled. Because revenge, he realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply walks away and lets silence speak.